Well, my name is Gene Reynolds. I was going to tell you anyway. Yeah. I didn't drink anonymously, did you? I wanted everybody to know I was drinking. I kind of tell them about it. I'd like for you to help me do something. There's something that happened to me early on in my sobriety, and if you all bear with me, I'd appreciate it if you'd help me with this. It was doing the third step prayer with another person, and it's on page 63. A lot of you all know that. And would you bear with me and help me do that third step prayer together? This is a bunch of people, and I'd like to do it. Do you mind? Just God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Thank you. That thing had a real impact on my life, and I'll tell you about it here in a little bit. I got, by the way, my sobriety date is February 2nd, 1970, and I am grateful for that. I had a little help getting sober. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I didn't get up one day and just say, well, this is a real nice day. I believe I'll just get sober today. It was one of those deals. I had no intention of getting sober that day on February 2nd, Groundhog's Day, of all days. It wasn't my idea to do that, but I had become a thief, and of course there's a certain amount of risk that goes along with being a thief, and that there's things happen to you that don't happen to everybody else. And I was thinking when Clancy was talking tonight that Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the few places that going to the nut house and going to jail, it's kind of kinky to us. We kind of get a kick out of it. See, hell, everybody else don't. It's kind of nice to be around people that you can, enjoy that kind of stuff. Neat, isn't it? I had the whole federal government help me to get sober, and I appreciate y'all, contributing. Y'all helped me out a lot, and I wanted to thank Jesse and his wife for picking me up. I tell you, Tina, and Mike, he's here. I've had a lot of correspondence with him, and there's Dick is another friend that's has corresponded a lot, and I want to thank you all. Thank the committee. I really have another, hey, good to see you. I really want to thank you for inviting me here, because I live in Amarillo, Texas, and it snowed 14 inches up there Wednesday and Thursday. So, I really appreciate you having me down here. Hell, this has a real special thing for me, being down here. I do love Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to say one other thing. I like Al-Anons. I know there are, how many Al-Anons in here? See, yeah, damn right, give him a hand. I tell you what, if it wasn't for Al-Anon, I don't think most of us would be here, You bet. I hear people putting them down and this and that. And, I've got an old Al-Anon friend, and she's not old. She's just old in the program of Al-Anon. And I talked to that lady. She's one of those people that you don't ask her something if you don't want to know the truth. Just don't bother, because she'll tell it. And I appreciate that. See, I appreciate people who tell me the truth, and I need that kind of input. Her husband was really kind of one of my sponsors, and by God, we need people like that that've been around. Incidentally, she has some. She gave me some tapes, or not tapes, but those old '78 records that Bill Wilson made. They're old red ones. They're old '78. She gave them to me. And, along with the big book that her husband used to have. She said she used to beat him over the head with it and then read it to him, So that's kind of the way I got this deal. I want to just kind of start in the middle of this, my story. When I got sober, I had been a thief for 3 years. I'd done that pretty much full time. And my alcoholism had progressed to the place where I couldn't get sober. I couldn't get sober long enough to get a job, and I really couldn't put anything together, and my health was not. I wasn't capable of handling a job, so I just turned to stealing. I had one friend who was a printer, and I had another friend who ran a business there in Denver, Colorado, and so being a clever alcoholic like we are, we don't suffer from stupid. That's never been our problem. We suffer from the disease of alcoholism, and But I put the two of these together. The one guy would get payroll checks and business checks from Texaco and Mobile and different people and Martin and Marietta. And so I took the checks from the one guy and I took them to the other guy and had him duplicate them in his printing business. And so I got in business. And I spent the next, and we duplicated a lot of things. We had money orders and negotiable bonds and a lot of things. And during the, you know how an alcoholic is. If a little bit's good, a whole bunch got to be damn good. You know, that's just the way. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing to excess. You know, I met a new friend over here, Mac. I was talking to him about the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic, and I had a few analogies about alcoholics and non-alcoholics and the difference in them. And one of them is, you know, you give an alcoholic a car and you give a non-alcoholic a car, and the way they react to that. The non-alcoholic, he'll get in it and he'll start it up and he'll say, boy, that thing really runs nice, and he'll go pick up his girlfriend and they'll go to the movies and they'll have a wonderful evening and everything's fine. And the alcoholic will get in it and he'll start it up and he'll listen to it and he said, boy, that runs good, I wonder why. You know, and he'll get out and open the hood up and he'll look in there and he'll see all these parts and he'll take the breather off and then he'll take the hood off and he'll pull some wires off to figure out why this thing runs so good, and pretty soon it don't work. You know, and that's kind of, Clancy was talking about the whys tonight. Hell, I don't know why we got to know all that stuff. We just do. Another difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic, that they each have a flat tire. The non-alcoholic gets out and changes it, and the alcoholic first contemplates suicide. You know, and we really do. I mean, you know, I'm serious. You know. Got one more about the difference between us. There's two doors. There's non-alcoholic and alcoholic, and they open one door, and there's a party going on in there. Everybody's eating and dancing and playing and having a hell of a time. And the non-alcoholic just walks in there. He don't even think about the other door. But see, the way we are, the alcoholic stands there a minute, looks in there, and boy, that's real nice. But he closes the door and he opens the other one, and the guy hits him in the nose. And he closes the door and he thinks, I don't believe that really happened. And he opens it up again, and the guy punches him again. You know, and he closes it again, and he thinks, by God, he can't do that to me. And he goes looking for it, you know. See, that's the way we are, you know. Just, anyways, there's some differences about, you know, something else about the alcoholic mind along that line is, I've experienced this in sobriety, and Clancy talked a lot about. Incidentally, I've known Clancy since 1971. I was doing time out in Terminal Island, California. It's a federal penitentiary, in case y'all, you know, aren't familiar with those places. A few of you might not have been there. But I was doing time, and Clancy came out and spoke out there. And, you know, I recognized what he said as being truth. You know, he came out and told a lot of things, and I've forgotten what he was doing for a living at that time. But I remember what he said is, you know, I recognize that that's truth. And, you know, we alcoholics are people that we may not like the truth, but we can recognize it and we respect it. See, I don't like what my sponsor says sometimes today. And I don't like what that old lady tells me sometimes today. I don't like what she said. But if it's the truth, I can handle it. See, we don't have to like it. You know. So, anyways, I've known him a long time. And last year we have a roundup in October. Some of y'all I know have been there, and I introduced him up at our roundup last year, so we've known one another a good while. And he's been carrying this message a long time, you know, and I have a great deal of respect for that. Getting back to my deal with the printing and all that, on with this story. This went on, the stealing and hanging this paper. I used to get people to go hang paper for me, and I finally got a gal that was sick enough to travel with me. And, you know, every good drunk needs needs somebody around to help them in those bad days. And, of course, she was one that she'd do a lot of those things that a drunk needs to have done, you know, and we traveled around the country. At one time, I was wanted in 33 states, you know. I got to thinking about, you know, they didn't really want me. They just kind of like for me not to come back there, you know, just we won't bug you if you don't bug us kind of thing. But you know, it was a kind of a deal that I used to wake up on a daily basis and wonder what I was doing on the face of the earth. I don't know if any of the rest of you ever thought about that, but I used to get up and I think, I wonder what the hell I'm doing here. Why am I on the face of the earth? You know, if you were around me, I was going to cause you some kind of trouble. I mean, if you couldn't be around me because you was going to be in something, I mean, you were going to be in a fight, or you were going to get threw up on, or get a car wreck, or you were going to jail, or something was going to happen to you. And I had abandoned my family had sold the house my family was living in. You know, and I can tell that in a room full of alcoholics and Al-Anons. I don't tell that out on the streets a whole lot now. You know, people out there don't understand that kind of a deal. But see, that's where my life had gotten to. Make a long story short about that, I finally got arrested. I was over in Safford, Arizona, and I fixing to tell you this. You know, it's a big part of my story. I can tell you a lot of drunk stories and old gun battles and crap. You know, shooting and bleeding and fights and throwing pool balls and, you know, hell, we all done some of that. And I've been in jail about 70 times. And it's something real interesting about that. I've never been there sober. They just don't lock me up sober. Hell, if I don't get nothing else out of Alcoholics Anonymous, just not going to jail is a hell of a deal, you know. For a drunk like me, I mean, that's a real hazard. But over in Safford, Arizona, I'd been hiding out on a ranch over in New Mexico, and it was 25 miles from the nearest town, and so there weren't even any law up there. There wasn't no sheriffs, there wasn't nothing, and so it was comparatively safe, and they didn't know what I was doing, none of those people out there, and so I'd make little trips out and get money. When I'd run out of money, well, I'd just go get some. You know, it was kind of an inexhaustible supply out there. You know, there was just money everywhere, and so I'd go out and recruit some. Well, one day I was out doing this, and it was in Safford, and I was drunk. And I want to tell you some things in case you want to get in the paper hanging business. Why, here's some things not to do. One, don't do it drunk. You know, you do a poor job of it. So, but I was drunk, and I went in this store, and this guy wouldn't take this check. And I cussed him out. Mistake one. Don't do that's mistake two. I was drunk, and then I cussed him out. If you're in that business, don't cuss out to people that are, you know, you're trying to hang this paper on, because they call the police when you do that. Second mistake, don't go next door. Yeah, I went next door, sure enough, and this old boy said, well, I don't have that much money in the cash register, so I'll have to take it back and get it out of the safe. Mistake three, don't let the check out of your sight. You and the check stay together, because when he leaves with the check, he's probably going to go call the police. So in case you want to do this, here's some things not to do, but I did it. The guy leaves and goes back, and about 2 minutes later, the police arrived, and I was one of those people. I carried guns all the time. I had a leg holster. I don't know if anybody ever seen those, and I had a shoulder holster, and I had a .25 automatic in my pocket, and I thought I was something between Dillinger and Jesse James, you know. You know, years later, I come to the realization that, you know, I thought I was bad. I really did. I thought I was just a bad hombre, and, you know, years later, I come to the realization that I wasn't bad. I was afraid. You know, and that was after working the steps. Hell, I wasn't bad. I was scared. You know, if I was so bad, what do I need all that armament for? You know, Jesus. Anyways, this guy, something really big happened to me in that particular day. Number one, I had shot at people, and I had been shot at, and I was wanted in 33 states, and I was about to die from the disease of alcohol, and I didn't give a damn. See, I used to think about suicide on a daily basis, and dying didn't scare me. Just damn sure it didn't scare me. And in fact, dying looked like a better deal than what was going on in my life. So it wasn't a case of me trying to do good, but that cop, the dumbbell, he walked up to me and he said, "You're under arrest," and turned around. He didn't shake me down. He just turned around and started walking towards the door. And here I am with all these damn guns. See, that's stupid. If you're a cop, don't do that. You know, see, that's not good business. So he starts heading for the door, and we get outside, and I hit him in the back of the head. Why I didn't shoot him, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't. The only explanation I have for any of that is, you know, is the amazing grace of God. See, I don't think any of us get sober on our own. I think we get sober by the grace of God. I really do. I don't think that we do it under our own power. I think we got a power greater than us doing it. Well, I hit him in the back of the head, and he kind of did a flip, and I wasn't in very good physical condition. A lot of people saw me do it, and they jumped on me, and it wasn't long, and I was in jail. Well, this gal that had been traveling with me had been waiting for me in the car, and when I didn't show up, she came looking for me. Now, if you happen to be traveling with somebody who's doing that, don't go looking for them. Hell with it. Yeah. Let them go to jail by themselves. You go on and do something else, you know, because you ain't going to help them. But she came looking for me, and as a result, we both ended up in jail that day. And there's a lot of things happened that day. Number one, I didn't shoot that cop. See, I could just as easily be doing life right now as to be standing here in this AA meeting, but I'm not, and I believe that's by the grace of God. Well, that same day, I used to make identification. I could make driver's license and do all kinds of things, and that particular day I was using the name Eugene Stevens, and the reason I used that name is because I stole a credit card and it had Eugene Stevens on it, and then I'd make driver's license and Social Security card to go with it. So this sheriff, I'm sitting in front of his desk, and he said, well, at least you picked a good name. And I said, how's that? And he turned his name plaque around it was sitting on his desk, and it said Sheriff Eugene Stevens. True story, and if you want your heart to go drop plumb out of you, I thought, oh hell, I'm gone. And I was. He didn't understand. In the process of this, they threw me in the hole because I had all these guns. I had a sawed-off shotgun in the car and a .30-30 rifle in the trunk, and paranoid as hell. But anyways, they put me in the hole. And if some of y'all haven't been there, it's a steel box, and it's like 4 by 8 by 8, and it's made out of plate steel, and there's a hole in the floor in one corner of it, and there's a recessed light in the ceiling that stays on all the time, and that's the way you live. And there's a GI blanket in there was the total accommodations. That was all the furniture there was. Well, they put me in there, and they put her over in the women's section, which was on the same floor along, but there's 2 or 3 doors in between. And so we could holler back and forth. Well, that night in that jail cell, something happened to me. I wanted to die, and I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'd ask you to raise your hands if it didn't think it'd embarrass you. But most alcoholics that I know much about, that sometime in their drinking or trying to quit drinking, living is a big pain in the rear, and they just would like to step off the world, and I didn't want to hurt. I didn't want a lot of pain. I didn't want a lot of suffering, and I didn't want to bleed, and I didn't want agony, and I didn't want a long-term illness. I just wanted to die, and if wishing I was dead would have done it, I'd have been dead a long time ago, but I didn't. So what happened, and now I had not uttered a prayer in 20 years. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute, too. About that. Clancy and I have a lot of the same things. Incidentally, I married a girl from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where Clancy was raised. I had some of that Lutheran input, too. And anyways, in this jail that night, I said, "Thy will be done." And I have no idea why I said, "Thy will be done." I had plenty of religious training, like Clancy. Now, my deal was a little different. We lived on a farm, and they had these kind of country churches up there in Minnesota. And what had happened, my mother went through a change of life, and she got religion. And I don't know that you have to get religion when you do that. I'm not sure, but that's what happened to her. And she got religion heavy duty. And she and my grandmother built a church, built a parsonage, and hired a preacher. I mean, they owned it, and it's like, tell me what I want to hear, I'll fire you. That's kind of the way the deal operated. And I was the sacrificial lamb, I'm going down there giving my soul to Christ, and I don't know what I'm giving him, and I don't know if he even wants it, And I don't mean to, disturb anybody by that, but all I was embarrassed. I didn't feel nothing. And they used to tell me that I ought to feel something, but I didn't feel nothing. And they'd baptize me all the time, They used to take me out in the river, and the preacher'd hold my nose and hold me under the water. And, I was supposed to feel something. But you know what I was thinking? I said, I hope this sucker don't get on one of them old long prayers and forget I'm under here. Because they do that. I'd hear them praying, when other people was doing it. I think, man, I hope this sucker gets on with it. And they try rivers and lakes and sprinkled and ducked and dipped and I kept screwing up. And so I'd had a lot of religious training, and when I got big enough to get away from it, I'd crawl out the church windows and I'd split, and I caused my mother a lot of embarrassment by all that. But when I got away from religion, I didn't pray to get out of jail. Never once did I pray to get out of jail. I just thought, well, God, if you go that way, I'll go this way, and I won't bug you. I sort of felt like that if I didn't bug him, he'd forget about me. That's something like that. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but it's kind of like that. And early on, I don't know if any of the rest of you had this, but I used to picture God as somebody who had a big scorecard up there. And he had good and bad on this scorecard. And if you got more good marks and you did bad marks, then you'd go to heaven. And if you got more bad marks, then you burn in hell forever. See, and I had this pictured in my mind. You know, a little old kid will picture a lot of stuff. And I thought, boy, that's bad. And you know, my parents or my mother told me that it was as bad to think it as it was to do it. And hell, I was thinking it all the time. You know, I was thinking something, shit, and then I got to where, hell, if it's as bad to think it, I'm just going to go do it. You know, because doing it was more fun than thinking it. Then when I got away from it, I thought, to hell with it. If I'm going to hell anyways, I'll just go. So that's kind of where I was at. But when I said this prayer, "Thy will be done," in the hole over there in Safford, Arizona, I didn't think I slept that night, and I didn't feel nothing when I said that. And the purpose of the prayer was because I wanted to die. See, I didn't want to live. It was just I wanted to get out of this world, and I knew I was on my way to the penitentiary, and I just didn't want to go. And I had so many crimes that there was no way that I was ever going to get out of jail. There were just so damn many of them. Hell, if you're wanted in 33 states, I had 17 counts in El Paso alone. You know, over here in Dallas, I tipped over 17 liquor stores. You know, well, hell, you don't get out of jail for, and run around with them guns. If you got a gun on you in the commission of a felony, you get 10 years just like that. And so I didn't think I was ever going to get out, and I wanted to die. But you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, it seems like when bad things happen to us, they turn out to be good. Did anybody else ever have that experience? And see, it didn't look like going to the penitentiary was going to be a good thing for me. I mean, if you would have asked me right then, Gene, do you really believe that going to the penitentiary will get your life straightened out? I said, no way, man. You know, me going to the penitentiary, I'm going to do life. Hell, that's what I'm going to do there. I didn't think I was going to get better. But you know, saying "Thy will be done" in that jail that night, I have not had a drink from that day till now, nor have I had a desire to drink. You know, and that's my miracle. See, that's what happened to me. The compulsion to drink was lifted from me at that moment, and I didn't even know it. You know, and see, I look around here, you know, I asked you to do that little prayer with me, that third step prayer before this thing started. Now, I've had some experiences with that prayer, and I'll share some of those with you. One of them was, there was an old boy that came from here, and his name was Mike. And he came up to the top of Texas, and he was a painter. And he used to he stayed at the men's halfway house there, and it's only about 4 or 5 blocks from the top of Texas, which is my home group there in Amarillo. And he'd have to make a beeline right from the halfway house right to the top early in the morning at 7 o'clock, otherwise he'd get drunk. I mean, he'd just get drunk, and he'd sit on his hands and shake, because he couldn't pick up a cup of coffee. It was impossible. So one day I was down there after the Sunday meeting. I gathered him up, and we're riding around my car and just shooting the bull. We go by my house, and sure enough, you know how us drunks will do. We're going to go save somebody or do something, see. So I get the big book out, and I got drunk, and he's in my car, so he's going to listen, right? You know, hell, I do them that way. By God, you get in here, you're going to hear something, you know. So if you don't want to hear about it, don't ride around with me. But I get to reading this book to him, and we come to page 63, where that little prayer was that we said. And I said, well, Mike, have you ever done this prayer with anybody? And he said, no, I haven't. And, you know, right below that little prayer, it says that this spiritual step is best taken with an understanding person. And so we get down on our knees, and we do this little prayer in my kitchen, and my mood at that particular moment was I wanted to take a nap. I mean, I was sleepy, and we'd just eaten lunch, and I just wanted to go take a nap. I mean, I was real spiritual, you know. Hell, yes, sir, got it right here, yes, sir. But I went and did it anyways because I knew I was supposed to. That was what I was supposed to do. And you know, the next morning the phone rang about 6:30, and it was Mike, and he said, boy, something happened to me. And I thought, what the hell? What happened? Did he get hit by a bus or something? You know, I didn't know what had happened to him. And I said, what happened, Mike? And he said, you know, I don't want to drink today. And I thought, no shit. See, this deal really works, you know. And once in a while, see, and you never know when it's going to work like that. See, so you don't want to pass up an opportunity to do it, because that may be the time that it works. I had another deal just about the same way. This gal, we were putting her on a Greyhound bus. She was going off to Kansas to live, and she had never done that prayer with anybody, and we're saying this prayer holding hands in the front of my car driving down the highway. Now, that doesn't really sound very spiritual, does it? I mean, you're going boogieing down the highway, and I never read anywhere that God don't hang around cars or people driving down the highway. I mean, I figure he's either here or he ain't, you know, and I saw that gal at a meeting over in Pampa, Texas the other night. She's got 8 years. You know, So we got a hold of something here in this deal, this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's so powerful that I don't think we have any idea how much power this deal's got. See, I don't think we got any idea how much this thing can do. Clancy was talking about, all the other programs that are going on and so on and so on. Well, I know where I belong. Hell, I belong to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know if there's a drunk pounding on my door, I better go talk to him. See, I'm going to go on with this story about that jail because it's a big part of my life. And what happened there was, it was in a Mormon community, and it was one of those deals where they kind of had everything sewed up, the judge and everybody. They kind of had the deal just pretty well sewed up, and there was a Mormon jailer, and there was a Mormon sheriff, and there was a Mormon judge, and there was a Mormon attorney, and so this gal and I were both in jail, and so I asked this attorney, I said, do you suppose we could get married? And he said, what? And I said, well, do you suppose we could get married, her and I? We've been traveling together for years, and we're probably going to go off the penitentiary or something. And he said, well, I don't know. And make a long story short, they agreed to let us get married. And you ought to have heard the proposal. I'd holler across there and said, hey, how'd you like to get married? Real romantic. I'm in the hole and she's about 4 doors down, locked up too. It's a real touching kind of scene. A drunk is real imaginative. Who in the hell would ever think about it, But we did get married in that jail, and the county clerk paid for recording the marriage license. The sheriff paid for the marriage license, and the FBI took the wedding pictures. Now, and that's a true story, by God. I've got them. The FBI, they got nice big cameras. They have pictures that are, a lot bigger than these little Polaroid cameras we have. And I've got the pictures to prove it. But, I look at those things, I look back on them, I think, my God, did that really happen, And it did. We were standing in the courtroom, and the judge, said, I now pronounce you man and wife, you can kiss the bride, and hell, that was all nice, and geez, it felt good. And, we're just standing there, and this judge didn't do nothing. He just started turning this paperwork over on his desk and started reading the charges. And I'm thinking honeymoon, of course. Didn't work. In that jail, like I said, when I said thy will be done, I haven't wanted to drink since that time. A lot of things happened there. There was a little old jailer who used to come by at night, and if you all spent much time in jail, well, they come around, and I was in the hole, and they thought I was kind of a bad guy because they put me in the hole, and so he'd come by, and I'd tell him old war stories and stuff about shooting and crap, and he just loved to come by and visit with me. So he had been going through my property downstairs, and he said, boy, there were some nice guns you got. And I said, you like them? And he said, boy, I really do. And I said, why don't you just take them home with you? And he said, you kidding? And I said, no, I'm giving them to you, man. Just take them. See, we were still in the custody of the county over there at that particular time. The statute of limitations has run out, folks. That's why I'm telling this story. I didn't tell this for the first 7 years, I'll guarantee you. It's true, I didn't. Fear is real. Yeah. See, if you think somebody's after you, they probably are. Yeah. But he took all these guns with him. He took them home, the dumbbell really did. And I have never heard one word about those guns to this day. See, and here again, we don't recognize some of these miracles that happen in our life. I'm supposed to at least done 10 years just for carrying those things around. See, a lot of things happen, and I have to believe for me that God took over the running of my life at that point. I went on to the penitentiary, Terminal Island out there, and I went to my first AA meeting out there. A lot of things happened. I found out the first experience I had with love in Alcoholics Anonymous was right there in Terminal Island. First meeting I went to, I'm sitting there, and I had stolen something like 360 grand or something over that period of 3 years, and I didn't have enough money left to buy a pack of cigarettes. Didn't have not even a pack of cigarettes, and they'd give us tobacco, and it was that old, I don't know if any of y'all ever got it, it's that old George Washington stuff, and it's got big sticks in it, and you got to get the sticks running the right way, or it pokes holes in the paper, and you just end up sucking air. I don't say, some of y'all understand that. Anyways, I'm rolling cigarettes, and this guy's watching me. I'm at the first AA meeting, and the tobacco's running out of both ends of this damn paper, and I'm shaking it. And this guy hands me a tailor-made cigarette. And if you've been around jails very much, people don't give you cigarettes. And if they do, there's something attached to it. There's a deal going somewhere, and you're going to pay for that some way. And I looked at him kind of like, You know, what's your deal, man? And he said, no, it's okay. And so I smoked this cigarette, and later that evening he gave me another tailor-made cigarette. And you know what came down about that was it was just one drunk trying to help another one. See, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it. You know, it was an extension of love from one alcoholic to another, giving him a cigarette. See, didn't know what the hell I was experiencing. Like most things that happened to me, I got to look back on them to see what happened. You know, so anyhow, that was where I experienced the first love. You know, from that point on, I went to all the AA meetings I could there in the joint, and we were talking, Tina and Jesse and I were talking this evening about, you know, these things about going to jail and things like that, you know, they seem like real bad things, but see, they changed my whole life. You know, they not only saved my life, they gave me another one. You know, and that's where I found AA. That's why I'm here. You know, hell, if it hadn't been for going to jail, I'd be dead or in a nut house or something. You know, I'd be doing life somewhere or something. But, you know, this deal really does work, and sometimes we don't know why. You know, I'm convinced of that. I stole my first AA book there in that penitentiary. It is a program that demands rigorous honesty, I know, and says it 3 times on page 58. You know, they must grasp and develop a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Well, there's 5 big books, and incidentally, in case y'all want to do something, get a bunch of y'all together who really want to do something and send some books to the penitentiaries. See, because there aren't many there. Out there were 5 big books and 800 people. See, and you know, and these people would come in. There's not a big book up here that I see anyway. They'd come in and they'd hold this book up and they say, "This is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous," and I'd think, well, that's got to have all the answers, you know. And they'd talk about it and they'd say things about it, and that's the only one I ever seen until one day in dorm 5, I'm walking along and I look down and there's one of those damn books, and I do this number. You know, I scope this deal out. And ain't nobody looking, and I light-fingered that big book. See, and now it's mine. See, and I take that sucker down and hide it under my mattress. You know, and I'd read it, and I couldn't understand it. Did anybody have the problem of you read a paragraph, and by the time you get to the end of it, you forgot what the first part was? Think, son of a bitch, my brain's gone, you know? Damn. You know, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I thought I had brain damage, and you do. You know, that's... see... We really do destroy brain cells, and but I couldn't understand that. And you know, these people would come in, and if you go to meetings and talk about the big book, you can't screw it up. See, it's when I get to talking about stuff that's outside of the big book. Now I can talk about my experience, and I can talk about what happened, yeah. But if I get to theorizing too much, hey, don't pay no hell of a lot of attention to me. You know, if it comes out of that book, hey, you can take that to the bank. I was telling Jesse this afternoon that, you know, if I don't do another damn thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to give books away. Now, I stole that first book, and I felt guilty about it. So when I got out of the joint, I left the book there to start off with, see, because I didn't want to be a real thief. So I left that book, and when I got out, I bought a book, and I gave it away. I thought, you know how we are about guilt. Oh, I got a bumper sticker here. Can you all see that? Thank you, Tina. I saw that, and I just had to have one. But I felt guilty, so I gave that book away, and I felt better. And I thought, well, you know, I'm just even now. I ought to get ahead of the deal. So I went and bought another book, and I gave it away, and damn if I didn't feel good again. So time went on, and then some drunk come by, and he didn't have one. I thought, Jesus. I didn't have any money, but I went and bought him a book. Well, what I did was I gave him mine, and then I had to go get another one, see. And now the people that I sponsor, if they ain't willing to give books away and ain't willing to work steps, we don't have nothing going, you know. And I believe this is a program of giving. See, I don't think you get yours and then say to hell with everybody. I think you got to give it away in order to keep it. And if you ain't willing to do that, you're probably in the wrong place. You know, because you won't be here long anyways. People I sponsor, we get together and we send books off to these penitentiary units. In fact, I got the address of one this afternoon, and what we do, we'll throw in 10 or 15 or 20 bucks a piece, and we'll send a case of books. They got to come out of the general service office. They won't let you send them in, you know, one at a time, you know, wrapped up, because you might be sending them other things other than books in there, you see. I got to tell you one little kind of a cute thing about the penitentiary. They would have visiting days, and I'd get to go out there sometimes, and people would bake cookies and I'm sure some of y'all have done this, and they'd bake grass into these cookies, you know, and everybody's out there just shoving them cookies in, you know. Load it up, boy. So, you know, there's a lot of ways to do that stuff. I'll tell you some of them later. I tell you, this experience of getting Alcoholics Anonymous in the penitentiary, I don't think it makes any difference where we get it. I think the big deal is getting it. When I got out of that penitentiary, I did not have a sponsor in there. I didn't know that you could get one in there. I didn't want a cop sponsor, you know, and I damn sure didn't want a robber sponsor. Hell, if they ain't any smarter than that, they wouldn't be in there. You know, and I didn't know about sponsorship, and I also, my opinion is that, I need a sponsor today, and I have a sponsor, you know. I think anybody in this program, now I don't know about you, I want to make one statement about sobriety. You know, I think there's a lot of things, and this is an opinion. I can give you some opinions, but I'll tell you if that's what it is. I hear people say, well, I haven't been sober, I've just been dry. Well, I don't know about you, but by God, if I haven't had a drink, I'm sober. See, and you get a newcomer and you tell him, well, you're not sober, you're just dry, and he don't know what the hell you're talking about, you know? By God, if I ain't had a drink, I'm sober. Now, I may be emotionally screwed up, you know, and I may be confused, and I may be a lot of things, but I'm sober, see? And I think it's important to let people know that, you know, that by God, I'm sober. And I think it's just a play on words, and that's my opinion about it, but I did want to say that. After I got out, I finally got a sponsor. I was in a little town of Whitefish, Montana, and there was an old man up there that I liked what he had to say. He drank up a whole string of grain elevators up there in Montana, and I liked his style. See, he had an airplane, and that was my deal. I used to fly. I was telling Jesse this afternoon, the last time I flew a plane, we had a Mooney Mark 21, and we come out at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and I'm drunk flying that Mooney, and we had 5 near misses coming out of Chicago. And I said, to hell with it. I just quit flying. I didn't quit drinking. No. See, you know, you can go too far with this stuff, you know. Yeah, my God. But, you know, in this deal, old Hans, this guy that drank up the grain elevators, I like what he had to say at meetings. And, you know, I tell people now, they say, well, how do you find a sponsor? And I said, well, you pray for one, and you go to a lot of meetings, and you listen. You know, and I've had 3 sponsors die. And here I lost one a year ago in October. And, shit, here I am without a sponsor, you know, and I'm sober about 15 years or 16. And so here I am taking my own advice. You know, you pray for one and you go to meetings and you listen. See, it doesn't make any difference how long you're sober. The rules are the same. You do the same thing. Well, I got old Hans, and he said, I'll be your sponsor, and he said, but it is necessary that you work the steps, and if you're not willing to work the steps, it won't work anyways. And he said, will you do that? And I said, yes, I will. I didn't know nothing about the steps, even though I'd been sober 5 years. You know, and it's possible to stay sober 5 years and not know anything about the steps, because I did it. You know, I mean, I'd read the book a hell of a lot of times, but I didn't know about working the steps, didn't know how to do it. And, you know, I see a lot of people today who, you know, they just kind of bop around AA and they don't get anybody to help them, and pretty soon they're gone, you know. So I think it's just damn important to get a sponsor. Well, so Hans and I, what we did, and he said there's 2 reasons for working the steps. One is it's going to save your rear, and the other is how are you going to help the next guy if you don't know what you're talking about? See, that made sense to me. So we start through the book, and we read the foreword and the preface and the foreword of the 2nd and 3rd editions, and we read the doctor's opinion, and then we'd talk about it. And then we'd read Bill's story, and we'd talk about it, and then we'd read There Is a Solution, we'd talk about it. And we went through the whole book like that, and as we were going through the book, we worked the steps. And he said that you can't screw it up by doing it that way. You know, now that made sense to me. If you're following the directions in the book, you can't screw it up. Where I screw it up is when I get away from the directions. Same today. See, anytime that things ain't working right, I mean, you know, I'm going to have problems, don't misunderstand, but if I follow the directions in the book, I get the results that are on the bottom of page 83 and the top of page 84. I get the results every damn time I do it, see. It's when I don't work the steps that I don't get the results. Well, we went through these steps. You know that little 3rd step prayer we did at the beginning? We got to that 3rd step prayer, and we're in my house, and he said, well, it's time to do the 3rd step. And I said, okay. What do we do? And he had me to read this little prayer, and he said, now we're going to get on our knees, and we're going to hold hands, and we're going to say it. And I thought, oh, God, you know, how corny. You know, I'm going to get on my knees with this old man, we're going to pray. And, you know, the worst part of it was there was a window behind me in this house, And I thought, what happens now if this old guy and I, we're down on our knees, and I'm holding this old man's hand, and somebody walks by there, and they look in there, and they see me holding this guy's hand. Now, what are they going to think is going on in there? They're going to think either we got some sort of kinky deal going, or some sort of voodoo crap or something. And that's what's going on in my head. Now, I mean, here again, spiritual? Oh, you bet. Yeah, I'm thinking. But I agreed to do it, so I'm down on my knees with this old guy. And we said that third step prayer, and I'm thinking, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. I ain't feeling spiritual worth a damn. See? But here again, see, I haven't had a drink since then. You know? So, you know, it's a deal of I got to take the action even if I don't understand what the hell I'm doing. I've had people say, well, why? I don't understand it. You don't have to understand it. It's sort of like why I got alcoholism. Hell, I don't have to know why. I just need to know I got it, you know. And I've looked at that deal about why I got alcoholism. Well, hell, it's all in my mother's family and stuff like that, and it doesn't really make a damn as long as I got it. I mean, if I had heart trouble, I wouldn't have to investigate why the hell I had heart trouble. I'd just go do the best I could with it, you know. Anyways, we did that third step, and we went on through the steps, and we came to step 4, and it was a mystery to me, and old Hans said something to me. I couldn't get started on it, and if anybody's having problems with that, now this is not in the big book. This is what was suggested to me by this old sponsor. He said, why don't you write down 5 things you swore you'd never tell another human being? And I thought, why the hell should I do that? You know? And he said, well, these are the things that you're going to take to the grave with you that you're so ashamed of that you're not going to tell anybody, and you've been hiding them all your life. And he said, you get those out first, and then the rest of it's easy. And if you get the worst stuff out, then it's downhill from there. Now, that kind of made sense to me, and it sounded like it might be a good deal because I was going to get it over with better and quicker and slicker, and, you know. So I thought, what's going on in my mind? I'll write down a few little old trashy things, and I'll tell him that, and I'll get him off my back, see. And he read my mind. He said, don't be writing down a bunch of little old trashy things just to get me off your back. Said, write down that stuff that you were going to die with. And I did. And one of the things was, I already told you tonight, that I sold the house my family was living in. You know, that's one of them. Another one was, and this is a real strange deal, happens to a whole hell of a lot of us alcoholics, male and female. When I was just a little kid, I through a keyhole and I saw my mother naked. Now, that was the first woman I had ever seen unclothed, see? And as a little old kid, I used to think about that. And that was fascinating to me. And I used to, as time went on, I would fantasize about that, and I felt guilty about it. I thought, geez, you ain't supposed to be thinking that kind of crap. See, now here I am standing in front of a room full of people telling you about it. See, what are you going to do, go out on the streets and tell somebody, hey, Reynolds is in there, he saw his mother naked, and he's thinking about it. You know who they're going to laugh at? Not me. I'd tell you the rest of it if it wouldn't embarrass you. Yeah. I don't care anymore. I'll do my 5th step from up here. I really don't give a damn, you know. And when I took those things to old Hans, he kind of got a grin on his face, and I said, Hans, if one word of this stuff gets out on the street, I'm coming across that desk and choke you to death. And he just laughed, and I said, man, it ain't funny neither, you know. And I handed him the list, and he read it, and he got a big grin on his face, and I got up out of my chair. I thought, you old son of a bitch, if you laugh one time, I'm putting one right between your eyes, see? And he said, wait a minute. He said, I ain't laughing at you. He said, I have done the same things you've done. And he went on to tell me some of the things that he'd done. He'd had that exact same experience with his mother, and he'd done, hell, he sold the house his family was living in and them grain elevators and drank them all up and flew to South America and spent the money, you know. See, so, you know, he and I, for the most part, we could have traded 4 steps and wouldn't know which one we had, you know. And see, I found that to be true with most people. Hell, you know, we think we're so bad and different and unique and all that crap, and the truth is there ain't a nickel's worth of difference in most of us, you know. I mean, I happen to, you know, run around with guns and stuff, but if you take that out of it, why, you know, we're about the same, really. And some of y'all did that. So then, from then on, the 4th step was a lot easier, and he taught me about writing about the resentments, about the things I needed to go through. I needed to write down the person's name I resented, why I resented him, how it affected me, what I had done wrong, and what I was going to do about it. There was kind of like 5 categories of things that I was supposed to do. And the last one, he suggested that I write down the word solutions. He said, what are the solutions to this resentment? And I'd write down, kill him. Yeah. Run over him with a truck, you know. And he said, now, what can you do about it? He said, you may need to go apologize to him. Jesus. You know how somebody, it's kind of like somebody, you walk up to somebody, kick them in the shins, and they hit you in the nose, who's wrong? It's, you know, most of these resentments that I have are kind of like that. You know, I got a part in these damn deals all the time, and I got to clean up my side of the street all the time. And so that's what he wanted me to do. Where had I been wrong, and what was I going to do about it? So I'd write down the solutions, and I'd list them. And when it comes to my parents, I want to share this particular deal with them because my parents never saw me sober. And if anybody's had this experience about trying to make amends to somebody who's dead, here's what I did about it. Now, it doesn't say this in the big book either. It's just what happened to me. I wrote to my parents, both of them, and I got off at a place where it was very quiet. It was in a park the first time I did it, and there was no outside noise, just nature. And I wrote a letter to my mother, and I realized that me climbing out the church windows and running off and doing all these things, you know, was an embarrassment to her. She didn't set out to screw me around. I mean, my mother didn't baptize me 38 times to mess up my head. She did it because she felt it was going to help me. See, she loved me. See, and I realized that she wasn't looking to hurt me or punish me or anything. She loved me. And see, the things that I did to her was embarrassing to her, you know, and I caused her pain, so hell, I had to make amends to her. And I wrote her letters, and I told her, Mother, I understand you were trying to help me, and I understand you love me, and I'd like to apologize for what I've done to you. And honest to God, I felt a sense of communication. I felt like I was actually communicating with her. And you know, you may say, well, hell, I think you're nuts. Well, you can think whatever you want to, but I felt absolutely like I was communicating with that person. And with my mother. Same thing with my father. And I've written to him 3 or 4 different times. I haven't in the last 5 years. I would then take those letters outside and set fire to them and just watch the smoke rise and say, God, it's yours. You know, that's it. I'm done with it. What else can I do about it? You know? And honestly, I'm free of it. I am free of it. I am not bothered with it. So that's just my experience with making amends to somebody that's dead. So Hans went on to explain to me about writing about fears. It's on page 68. It says we put our fears down on paper even though we had no resentment connection with them. And down at the bottom of the page it says we ask God to remove our fears and direct our attention to what He would have us be. And at once we commenced to outgrow fear. And I thought, boy, that's what I want, some of that at-once stuff. I don't know a drunk going that give me a quick fix every time, see. I got an old friend in Las Cruces, New Mexico. He said, you know, a drunk will take a fast buck rather than a slow 5 every time, you know. And that's us, you know, we want a quick fix. And it doesn't say you get over the fear entirely. It just says you commence to outgrow it immediately. And you do. Once you put it on paper and you share it with another person, and you ask God to remove those fears and direct your attention to what you'd have you be, you damn sure do outgrow them. And you do commence to overcome them right then and there. I know one thing, if they're 3 feet tall, or my fears are 10 feet tall. I don't know about yours, but I got big time fears. If they're 10 feet tall, when I tell them to somebody, or when I write them down, first of all, they're reduced to about 5 feet tall. And when I tell them to somebody, they're only about a foot tall. They ain't near as bad as I thought they were, see. And yeah, I have people that I sponsor, they don't want to write. They don't know how to write. And if you're sponsoring somebody that don't know how to write, for Christ's sake, show them. Get a piece of paper out and show them. Write something down for them. Show them how you do it. Nobody ever took the time to show me in that penitentiary how to write stuff down. I might have had a hell of a lot more progress if they had it. And you know, the thing went on like that, and Hans took me through the whole series of steps, and I moved away from there, and he died about a year later. And my God, it was like losing my father. You know, I mean, it was awful. Jesus. He knew more about me than my father ever knew about me. Now, earlier on in my sobriety, I had lived in a little town in New Mexico, and I had asked this old lady to be my sponsor. She was sober 25 years at the time, but I moved before we ever got started working the steps, so I naturally went back to her, and I said, well, you know, Susan, here I am, and, you know, here's what I've done, and what are we going to do now? Well, we proceeded on, and she was my sponsor until she died a couple of years ago. In between there, I moved over to Amarillo, and I had another guy that was my sponsor. Some of y'all know him, Cotton James. He lived in Lubbock, Texas, and he was my sponsor, and he died. And, you know, through the process of all this, you get to looking at what these people give us. See, they died, but see, that information didn't die with them. They touched a lot of lives, and so anytime we're out there carrying this message, hey, you leave it someplace. You give it to people. It isn't gone forever. Because those people left it with me. I want to tell you a couple of things about how this program in my life today and about how it applies to me. First of all, I teach DWI classes for Amarillo College. I had 7 DWIs, and whoever thought getting DWIs was going to pay off? Well, I didn't know I was going to benefit. Now, I've been in jail about 70 times or so, and I do counseling for felony probationers for the district courts over in Gray County, Texas. I didn't know it was going to pay off going to jail. Hell, it didn't look like it was going to help at the time. It looked like this was a downhill deal to me. Those are some of the things that I do for a living now. And as far as the credit part of it is concerned, I probably have already borrowed more money than I can pay back. But see, I have credit, and people trust me, and we do regain all this stuff. A lot of times I don't regain it nearly as quickly as I want to. But I want to tell you a couple other things. One is about my son. My son came down to visit me. I lived on a ranch over in New Mexico, and he came to visit me, and he kind of hung around 2-3 days and didn't really have much to say. And we're driving back up to Espanola, New Mexico, and he got kind of quiet. I said, "What's bugging you, Tom?" And he said, "Well, Dad," he said, "I'm selling cocaine and I'm strung out on this stuff, and I don't know what the hell to do." And he owed the dope dealers $4,500. He'd bought a bunch of dope, and him and his buddies got together and had a big party. And I know how that operates. Hell, I know how that goes. I've done the same thing. And they didn't pay the dope dealers, and the cops were after him too. And he said, "Dad, I don't know what the hell's going to happen, but I'm scared and I don't know what to do." And now I could have borrowed the money and got it to him, but I tell you what I did. I stopped and I said, "Let's get a cup of coffee." And we had a cup of coffee, and I went and got on the phone. And I called this old sponsor, and I asked her. I said, "Susan, what do you think about this deal?" And she said, "Well, Gene, what would you do if it wasn't your son?" I said, "I wouldn't do nothing." She said, "Do different rules apply to your son than they do other people?" I said, "No." And I went back out and sat down with Tom, and I said, "Well, Tom, I love you, but if I bail you out of this dope deal, it probably won't be the end of it. And I want you to know I love you and I care about you, but I can't do nothing about this deal. It's your deal, And that was it. He dropped me off, and he went back to Colorado. And he never, to this day, has told me what happened to that dope deal. But this coming fall, he'll get his PhD. See, and I don't know. I do know this, that by myself, I probably wouldn't have come up with that solution. See, I needed a sponsor. And I do know, I had a shrink tell me one time, it says we only begin to grow when we become totally responsible for our own actions. And had I assumed his responsibility, what the hell's he going to learn? Nothing. And I know it's kind of hard. See, it was hard for me to do that. Tell you something else that happened as a result of that deal. My son came to stay with me in Amarillo for a while, and went back to, he was going to college up in Washington, the state of Washington, and he was living with a gal up there. They were both going to school, and they were intending to get married. And one day she showed up. She worked at a jewelry store, and she showed up. She had a new ring, and he was wondering how she got the ring. And to make a long story short, he finds out that she's sleeping with a jeweler, and romance goes to hell. And he writes, I find this all out in letter form. He writes me a long letter telling me that he wanted to kill, pardon me, he wanted to kill both of them. And I don't know if anybody else has ever been in that shape, but I mean, if you ever have, you want to go kill them and then kill yourself, and you want to get drunk, and you want to get messed up, and you want to move to Tijuana, and whatever else goes on. But anyways, he wrote me this letter, and I wrote him a letter back just like I would write any alcoholic. I mean, I wrote, you write about this, you write about the resentment, you write about the fear, you write about what solutions you have available to you, and you pray for them. And I sent him a big book too, and that deals on page 552 of the big book of the third edition, where it tells us to ask God to give those people what we want. And I thought, how in the hell is giving them what I want going to help me? That didn't make sense when I first read it. I just know it works. I can't. Hey, I just know it works. I don't know why it works. But anyways, I wrote him this long letter and told him all this stuff, and I didn't hear from him in about 3 months, and I thought to myself, well, I'll bet he's up there thinking, how old Dad done slipped a gear. Hell, here he is telling me all this stuff. And I get a letter, and I have a bad deal. Incidentally, I teach defensive driving, too, up at Amarillo College, and I read my mail when I'm driving down the street laws, So don't do as I do. Anyways, I'm driving down the street reading this letter, and it goes on to say that, here's the way he started the letter, and he said, Dad, that was some heavy shit you told me. And the letter went on, and he said, I did pray for those people, prayed for him, and this guy, the jeweler, got divorced, and then that deal didn't work, and Tom found another girlfriend, and he was happy with her, and he was not hating his old girlfriend anymore because she had had some bad things happen in her life, and none of which he had any part in. To make a long story short, the program works for other people too, even if they are your kids. And I thought it was dumb to kind of send that to him, but at the bottom of the letter, I had to pull over to the curb. At the bottom of the letter, he said, Dad, I haven't told you this before, but I love you. Hell, I had to park the car. I had tears just rolling down my face. I had to park the car. I couldn't go on, And that's some of the stuff that's happened in this program by AA. It's things like that that happen in my life. There was a gal that went to our group, and she had cancer, and she was dying with it, and she could, whenever you'd move her, bones would break and things. She was so eaten up with it. And we used to talk about God a lot. And one day, they told her she had 3 days to live about if she didn't take a transfusion. And so I'm sitting there by her bed holding her hand, and we're talking about that. And if she did take a transfusion, they said that she might have 3 weeks or something. So we're talking about what she ought to do and stuff, and I asked her if she had anything she hadn't done, so on, so on. So she kind of closed her eyes, and I just held her hand. I thought she might have died or something, So the thing went on there for a little bit, and then she opened her eyes, and she kind of had a smile on her face, and I said, well, I guess you've made a decision, Helen. And she said, yeah, I have. And she said, I've decided I don't want the transfusion. And we had talked about God, and we talked about, how, after we leave this place, about there's no pain and there's no fear, there's no jealousy, there's no need, there's no want, there's no, we don't have all the pains we have here. And I said, Helen, it sounds so damn good, I believe I'll just go with you, And see, that's something, here comes from a dying lady, I felt like I had gotten that much closer to God. See, just being with that, and she's a sober alcoholic. She was sober 8 years when she died, and I've seen that this program of Alcoholics Anonymous works even when people are dying. If it works for that, it'll work for anything. See, because she was in a hell of a shape. A horrible pain and a lot of things. And if anybody's in here has trouble with the God deal, I had an old boy that got out of the McAllister Penitentiary up here in Oklahoma, and his name was Chuck, and I met Chuck here a few years ago, and he got out of the joint, and he kind of got a sponsor while he's in there, and so when he got out, he called up his sponsor, and he said, is there anything you want me to do? And his sponsor said, yeah, Chuck. He said, I want you to get on your knees every day and ask God to keep you sober. And Chuck said, I don't know if I can do that. I ain't too sure I believe in God. And so he said the next morning he got up and he got on his knees, and he said, to whom it may concern, please keep me sober today. And when I met old Chuck, he's sober 8 years. So if that's where you're at, hey, if that's what you got to do, that's cool. That's cool too. I was telling a friend here before we got into this meeting tonight that I had 3 years ago I had it was a real hard thing for me, happened to me, and I didn't know it was going to happen. One day about 4 o'clock, my wife called. She said the sheriff's going to be there in about half an hour. And he's going to bring you some divorce papers. And I had no idea what the hell was going on. Didn't know nothing about it. Didn't see it coming. Didn't nothing. And I thought about killing myself. I really did. I thought about suicide. And it was just a hell of a painful deal. Well, in the process of that, she got a restraining order, and I couldn't buy nothing, sell nothing, borrow money. I couldn't do a damn thing. Anyways, I had read someplace, and I'm just sharing this because of the thing about faith. I'd read someplace that if you write the check just like you're going to pay the bill, even though you don't have any money, believe that God's going to provide the means to pay that thing. So I'd write the damn checks out, and I'd put them in the envelope, and I'd write on the back of the envelope when I had to mail them, and how much the check was for, and which bank it was drawn on. And I set them up there on my desk, and I've been doing that for 3 years, and I haven't missed one bill, you know. And see, I would never have done that if it hadn't been for Alcoholics Anonymous. Would never have done that. One more thing I want to share about that, and I'm going to sit down here, but the thing about fear, you know, I had great fear about going broke, about what other people thought about me, about, you know, the people that I sponsored. My God, you're sober 15 years and can't stay married. I thought I had fear about what they're going to think about me. And, you know, I didn't grow farther apart from those people. I grew closer together, you know. They didn't quit loving me because I was married or divorced. What the hell difference does it make, you know? That doesn't make any difference. You know, we love each other, married, single, you know, rich, poor. In here, everybody's the same, you know, and I like that. What I discovered in that process is when I'm the most afraid, and when I start wanting to stick all this stuff in my pockets and hoard it all for me, when I become the most afraid, that's when I need to give. And you know, it doesn't make sense to me when I'm getting broke that I need to give. But by God, that's the way it works. And I started, that's when we organized this deal to start sending books to the penitentiary. And I started, you know, I made sure that every week I gave a book away. I'd go down to the halfway houses and I'd find out who didn't have a book. And by God, they're going to get one by the time I leave. And sometimes I didn't have enough money to pay the bills. But, you know, by the end of the week, I could mail those checks that had to be mailed, you know. And, you know, probably nobody's going to remember a damn thing I say, but if I give them a book, I know that's going to stick with them, because what's in that book, what's in that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the truth, see. I want to say one more thing, kind of a humorous thing about a book. There used to be an old boy he was the club manager at the top of Texas. His name was Bub. And one day I gave a guy a book in the club, and there was a side door that was open, and Bub and I were standing there, and this guy walked out the front of the building and down the side of it, and he had this book in his hand, and he threw it in the dumpster as he was walking down the alley. And it struck me as funny. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if there was some dude sleeping in the dumpster and this damn book hits him on the head, and he's sitting in there and he picks it up and reads it, you know. And Bub and I just stood there and had a hell of a laugh over that, you know. You know, I haven't got any real secrets for anybody except that this program of Alcoholics Anonymous does work. And I don't really have any other answers for a living. You know, I don't have no big secrets. I found God in this program. I found the answers to my problems in this program. I found my friends in this program. I have friends outside, but most of them are in here. I found a sense of belonging, and no longer do I wander around the face of the earth wondering what the hell I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm a part of something, see? And for years I wasn't a part of nothing. You know, and all of a sudden I belong, and I have a purpose in life. And I don't know what the hell we think we're supposed to get out of this deal, but see, all of a sudden I got a reason for living, I got a purpose for living, and I got a means of living. And I'll share this deal with you, is that I've had everything I've needed since I got sober. Everything I've needed. And there's a line on page 553, it says, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I get everything I need, and when I get what I need, I invariably find that it's just what I wanted all the time. And I'm still back to thy will be done. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.